let's do some coverage on Pope Leo, once again, being confirmed as the latest Pope. This is courtesy of CBS, and the title states very clearly Pope Leo the 14th's ideological positions and what his election means for the church.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. A truly history-making day at the Vatican, where the Catholic Church has elected its new leader. This was the scene just a short time ago when Cardinal Robert Prevost of the United States came to the balcony in St. Peter's Square after being announced as the new Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Cardinal Prevost, who was chosen the name Pope Leo XIV, blessed the crowd after his speech, shortly after the conclave made its final decision.
How we can together be a missionary church.
Pope Provost, or Pope Leo, I guess I should be calling him now, hails from, of course, Chicago. That means that he is going to hang a Derrick Rose jersey in his room wherever he decides to stay. That also means that the Vatican is going to have a steady shuffle that includes Chief Keef, Lil Durk, folks like that. I don't really I don't care about the religious significance of this. I'm not talking about this from a religious perspective. I'm more so concerned with the political ramifications of this. Not that the Pope plays a role in global politics, but coming from Pope Francis, who was very left-leaning, very openly pro-Palestine, very against the genocide that Israel is doing in Gaza, just overall a very inclusive and welcoming religious figure, which at a time like this, especially in the United States, when you have such a rise of Christian nationalism, I think is necessary, because the whole idea of Christianity, at least how it is explained, at least how it was explained to me when I was a young child, is that Jesus loved everybody. He loved all of his neighbors. He didn't discriminate. In fact, the only people that he strongly disliked were wealthy people, which is another thing that I can get behind. But yeah, Pope Francis was very, very left-leaning. This gentleman, not so much. He is rather centrist in a lot of his opinions from the reading I've done on him. By no means is he the most liberal Pope who had a nomination, but he is also far from the most conservative Pope nomination.
A church that builds bridges, that is always open to receive everyone, just like in this square, to receive everyone, to welcome everyone. Our charity, our dialogue and love.
Pope Leo XIV is the first American-born pope to be elected ever. The 69-year-old was born in Chicago before doing his missionary work in Peru. He went on to be elevated to a cardinal by Pope Francis in 2023. Now, it took at least 4 rounds of voting over the course of 2 days to see this: the white smoke billowing out of the chimney on the Sistine Chapel, announcing the selection of the 267th pontiff. Out of the 133 cardinals who participated in the voting, 2/3 of them plus one had to agree in order to solidify the decision. As you can see in these images, tens of thousands of people have rushed to St. Peter's Square to witness the spectacle and to celebrate the moment. Now, we have team coverage of the new Pope. CBS News Papal contributor Francis Rocca is in Rome, and CBS News Papal contributor Candida Moss is with me here in Studio 57. Frank, we're going to go ahead and start with you. First, just your reaction, what you make of the new Pope and the reaction in the crowd.
Well, it's remarkable. I mean, he was on some of the lists. This doesn't come entirely out of the blue, but late in the game, everybody assumed that if we had a result this quickly, it would be Cardinal Parolin, because he was the front runner without a question. And we thought if somebody else is going to emerge, it's going to take longer. But that turned out not to be true. And you know, as journalists, I think we were hoping for an exciting story, and you know, an Asian Pope, an African Pope. But this is no less exciting.
There were several charts floating around online about each papal nominee. I think that's the appropriate phrase. And their political leanings, as I've mentioned multiple times already. This guy was on none of them. So I don't know the specifics of the nomination process. I don't know if there's like special eligibility requirements. I'm not that educated on this topic, so Forgive me, but yeah, I was trying to do some research on this guy, and he was virtually like unknown, at least to bystanders like myself.
Describe him ideologically in terms of many of the issues that will be facing the church and that he will have to contend with as Pope.
Well, it's an interesting question. He served for a little bit more than 2 years at the end of Francis's pontificate. He ran the office for the selection of bishops. So he was in charge of advising the Pope on what bishops to appoint. He kept a low profile on the most contentious, neuralgic, sensitive, controversial issues. But when he was in the previous pontificate under Pope Benedict XVI, and he was the head of the Augustinian order, a religious order, he spoke in a more familiar way of that period about culture war issues, about homosexuality or about abortion or about the secular media and that sort of thing. So it's interesting. It will be interesting to see if that voice reemerges now. That was sort of taboo. It was out of fashion under Francis. We'll see what happens under Leo.
What this gentleman is talking about is back in like the early 2010s, Pope Leo, he wasn't necessarily like homophobic in his comments. I do actually have a direct quote from him on homosexuality where he says popular culture fostered sympathy for beliefs and practices that are at odds with the gospel, citing this. I'm reading this off of his Wikipedia because of course I am, which cites the New York Times in this specific instance, citing the homosexual lifestyle and alternative families comprised of same-sex partners and their adopted children. This came back in 2012. This was, of course, before gay marriage was legalized in the United States. This is like seemingly for the time this is seemingly for the time a mainstream opinion. By no means is he woke. By no means is he a practicing Marxist or anything like that. He has voiced his opposition to abortion, to contraceptives, things that are seemingly in line with Christianity. I don't know if they're going to mention it in this video, but back when he was serving in Peru, Pope Leo was associated with multiple instances of sexual assault into which he did not open up investigations. Now, do with that information what you will. When I am presented by this, when this is presented to me, that's wrong. If someone comes to you with a credible case of sexual assault, I think that you should go about all of the appropriate protocols. However, this is the Catholic Church we are talking about. The Catholic Church that has a history of moving around priests or deacons or high-ranking officials to different churches and parishes if they are caught doing some sort of sex crime in one of them. So, wrong. I think I can confidently say that that is the wrong way to go about this.
Yesterday, you were telling me the longer this goes on, the more interesting and unpredictable the process becomes. Do you think that this
very much like the Shadur Sanders getting drafted
decision was made so quickly by design for the Cardinals to show a sense of unity?
Well, I think has been that pressure in recent decades, not just in recent years, but in recent decades, the feeling that a long conclave will be a problem. And I think that there is a lot of division in the church. Everybody knows that. Polarization grew. To some extent, Francis revealed what was already there. To some extent, he exacerbated it for better or worse. And I think there was a great desire for unity, and they unified behind him. I think he probably was able to swing evidently a fair number of moderates, at least, maybe also conservatives behind him.
What's next for Leo XIV?
Well, it's a good question. One thing is interesting. A lot of us were waiting to see when he came out onto the loggia, whoever he was. We still didn't know whether he'd be wearing the red cape, the mozzetta, traditional vestment that was worn for this occasion. That Francis eschewed. Francis said, "I don't want to wear that," and that was the first sign that Francis is going to be very different. Well, first sign after his name, so Leo has chosen to go back to tradition in that detail. We'll see if that continues. We'll see to what extent does he follow the model of Francis. Does he live in the apostolic palace that Francis didn't want to live in? Does he ride in small cars? Does he give the blessing to the journalists when he meets the journalists later, as he probably will in a few days? Or Francis didn't bless the journalists because he said some of you are not Catholic. So all these little deviations from tradition that Francis did, will Leo go back to them? That will be an interesting sign.
Okay, thank you so much, Frank Rocco. We appreciate you. I want to turn now to CBS News papal contributor Candida Moss. She's also an Edward Cadbury Professor of Theology at the University of Birmingham in the UK. What more can you tell us about Pope Leo? He was known to the cardinals, right?
That's right, because he has held this administrative position in Rome for a number of years, and that meant he was very well known to cardinals. Having traveled the world as head of the Order of Augustins, he had also traveled, and he had spent a lot of his life in Peru, so he's well known to South American cardinals. In fact, when he came out onto the balcony, he greeted the Peruvian people. He spoke in Italian as the new Bishop of Rome, and then in Spanish as hearkening back to that identity. We had this global college of cardinals put together by Pope Francis, and they elected a global pope, someone who understands the global north, being
Right-wingers probably think that this guy is woke because he can speak multiple languages as someone who was born in the United States. The Pope speaking Spanish? Why's the Pope speaking Mexican? Why's the most prominent member of the Catholic Church speaking the devil's tongue?
an American and someone who understands the global South as well. He's also someone who has taken a vow of poverty, who we should expect to follow Pope Francis's footsteps in missionary activity, reaching out to the margins of the church, and embracing humility moving forward.
What should we take away from his chosen papal name?
It's a really interesting name. Pope Leo the Great was known for two things: as a great intellectual and theological reformer, and our new pope has a doctorate in canon law. And so we might expect that he too is going to clarify the church's teachings on central issues, as Leo the Great did. But Leo the Great was also known for meeting with Attila the Hun and dissuading him from attacking Rome. So we might also see this new pope as someone who knows that he has to stand up to the sort of strong men in the political arena right now.
It's really interesting that this journalist mentions that, because Pope Leo was very public on his social media in his rebuking of Donald Trump back in 2015, and more recently, J.D. Vance, the fake Catholic convert. Pope Leo tweeted, not at J.D. Vance, but used his name in the tweet, and said something along the lines of, Jesus doesn't pick and choose who he loves. And conservatives are very upset about that as well, at least online conservatives, because they're fucking hateful assholes. They pick and choose who they love, despite the fact that they claim themselves to be Christian.
What should we take away from his role as head of
Or
the Order
Catholic,
of Augustine?
pardon me.
Well, the Order of Augustine, they have a vow of poverty. They see themselves as living a life of service and great humility and universality, as St. Augustine wrote about. And he even quoted St. Augustine in his opening address. So we should see him as very much in the mold of Pope Francis, as embracing the whole world and taking us forward in this kind of role of a man of the people who walks the walk, who isn't into the trappings, Mazetta aside, and wants to see a Christian clergy that embraces its roots in poverty and service.
Candida Moss, thank you so much.
This is the detail of something that I was referencing. Robert Prevost on July 31st, 2015, Cardinal Dolan, why Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric is so problematic. He shared this article from the Washington Post. As I mentioned, if we can go to his page, his most recent retweet is one that makes fun of Donald Trump and Nayib Bukele. As I mentioned, he was. Oh, here's the tweet. JD Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. So this guy, at least when it comes to at least social issues, does seem to be like center left. I would say he expressed sympathy for George Floyd and his family after he was murdered by Derek Chauvin, which is another thing that conservatives don't like. And underneath this article, the anti-immigrant article, Laura Loomer, the freakazoid white supremacist who handcuffed herself to Twitter HQ after she got banned, who also directly has the ear of Donald Trump, says woke Marxist Pope. Now, this is this is merely virtue signaling. Laura Loomer is trying to capitalize on her fan base, not knowing what either one of these words mean. They see the word woke, they see the word Marxist, and they automatically associate it with the blue-haired libtard who's putting their pubic hair in their coffee, which is not the case. Conservatives, as we know, for the last like fucking decade or so, they use the word woke as almost like a slur to make fun of people who don't think that you should be racist to black people, who don't think that you should be misogynistic, who don't think that you should be transphobic. They literally see someone who is a decent human being, who is accepting and respectful of their fellow human beings, and think that person is woke and gay, and I don't want to associate myself with them. Now, the Marxist perspective, I don't think Laura Loomer is talking about the Pope's vow to poverty, because as we know, socialism is when no iPhone, socialism is when no fancy car, socialism is a poverty cult wherein no one can have any money ever. No, they just didn't get a fascist Pope who wants to liquefy every fucking immigrant on the face of the earth, who is also tied at the hip with Israel, which I don't know why the fuck they would expect that. It's the Roman Catholic Church. It's the Roman Catholic Church. Why the fuck do they care so much? Like, if you are a non-Catholic, why do you give a fuck about the Pope to this degree? And Laura Loomer is Jewish, I'm pretty sure. I mean, obviously, she cares from the standpoint that this Pope may or may not, disagree with her on Israel, very much like Pope Francis did. Yeah, this is I will very much enjoy the updates about this situation. We can go down her page. She has been freaking the fuck out. She's been freaking the fuck out on the timeline. Someone retweeted or quote tweeted her, Frank McCormick. I don't know who the fuck this guy is. Ex-teacher. He's a Roman Catholic himself. He has a Studio Ghibli profile picture. So this appears to be conservative infighting. Oh yeah, patriot with the American flag. Yeah, you are not Catholic. We do not need you to interject sensationalist half-truths for clicks during this special moment for us. Laura Loomer quote tweets, I don't need to be Catholic to see with my own eyes. There's nothing to celebrate. What do you want to do? Blow some smoke and cry over a pope who supports mass migration and open borders? Here's your new amazing pope. Conservatives love losing. They love it. She is a conservative. What the fuck is she saying? Also, she's a fucking idiot. This is literally one of the dumbest people I've ever observed with my own two eyes. When actually, I'm hesitant to use the word competent, conservative commentators make up a lie. They at least try to base it in some sort of fact. The Pope, Pope Leo, has never at any point spoken publicly on immigration, it seems, because there's been nothing that's come out of that. Why do you reflexively believe that he supports mass migration and open borders? How do people have the capacity to do these mental gymnastics to land at this ridiculous point but not have the same when it comes to critical thinking. This is Cardinal this is Pope Leo retweeting Cardinal DiNardo, who said, on behalf of all the bishops in the United States, on behalf of all the bishops of the United States, I join leaders from around the nation in condemning the violence and hatred that have now led to one death and multiple injuries in Charlottesville, Virginia. Why is this like a hat on fire moment for conservatives? You mean to tell me that the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, a historically pacifist institution, at least at least in modern times, is anti-violence? What the fuck? I understand that there are parts of the Bible that do talk about violence, but I'm pretty sure that, Jesus didn't really talk about violence, although I guess I'm conflating Christianity and Roman Catholicism, which, could be a shortcoming on my part. But still, it's all fundamentally the same religion, it seems, with minor differences in nuance. The point remains, why the fuck does Laura Loomer care so much? If you're having a meltdown over the Pope, why does it impact you so much? The Pope is not a major player in geopolitics. In fact, Pope Leo probably isn't even going to meet with JD Vance, because JD Vance is the literal antichrist. And there is the chance that a tragic event unfolds shortly after those two meet.